Welcome to Remote First Innovators, the podcast for leaders who are scaling companies built for the modern world. We sit down with founders and experts in distributed work to explore how they've broken down barriers and solved the real-world challenges of growing and running remote teams. Each episode dives into practical strategies for onboarding, IT, security, compliance, and everything it takes to build a thriving distributed business. No fluff, no theory, just what works when your team is everywhere and operations never stop. Here are your hosts, Robert Phelps and Jake Gump.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Remote First Innovators. I'm here today, and I'm just super excited to have Liam Martin with Time Doctor running remote. Liam, you've got a whole list of accomplishments, and I'm just going to let you introduce yourself. How about that?
That sounds good. My name is Liam Martin. I'm co-founder of TimeDoctor.com, which is a time tracking tool for remote teams, and then I'm also the co-organizer of Running Remote, which is the largest conference on remote work. And then about 3 years ago, I actually wrote this, which is the same name, Running Remote, which became a Wall Street Journal bestseller a couple years ago. And I'm really passionate about figuring out how work works, particularly inside of remote, which we've been talking about quite a lot, Jake, because I knew that you were at the last Running Remote event, and we got on pretty well. I know we didn't chat that long, but it was a fantastic experience last year, and excited to be able to see it come back next year.
Yeah, it was so inspiring being around others that were as passionate about remote work as Robert and myself, the owner of Creative IT. And I think it really opened our eyes to just how, special remote work is, how popular it is now. And man, what an event. The speakers I thought was amazing. And the partnerships and the clients and just everything about that event. We're happy to be sponsoring again next year. So we're already looking forward to that. I've been looking forward to this podcast for a long time with you, and you're not just building remote teams. You're shaping, in my opinion, how the world works remotely. And speaking of scale, let's kick off things with a wild story that you shared off mic and around the G20 country onboarded, how they onboarded Time Doctor overnight.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, going back to remote work and it being something that isn't going anywhere, I don't think many really understand where remote work was pre-pandemic and where it is today. I tell a lot of people that my definition of whether or not you were cool is if I knew you in the remote work world before the pandemic, because the world just got like 20x bigger, right? After February of 2020. So February 2020, 4.5% of the US workforce is working remotely, approximately. By March, that was at 67% of the US workforce working remotely.
Wow.
That is the biggest shift in work since the Industrial Revolution. But the Industrial Revolution took about 80 years, and we did that in March. So it impacted and changed everything that you understand about not just work, but how we socialize, economics, politics. And so the implications of that, I think we are still feeling today. And it's really important to be able to recognize that also remote work isn't really going anywhere. A lot of people think that remote work is going away. It's actually the polar opposite. It has been remaining stable and actually peaked up a little bit over the last 2 quarters, over the last 2.5 years. So remote work right now from that top of 67% is around the high 20s, which is essentially almost a 5x increase from where we were back in February of 2020. So when that happened, to your point with regards to the clients, I mean, we were growing well before COVID, but it was, I think I was telling you before, it was like one of those game shows where they put you in the tube and they've got like the hurricane of money, and you just try to grab $20 bills and stuff them down your bras as fast as you possibly can. That was us for like May, June, July, August, and September of that year, because there was no stopping. I was working about 80 plus hours per week, and I was burning both ends of the candle, as they say. So one of the things that happened about a month and a half into that was a G20 country. And this is because we had a sales team, we had a relatively small sales team, but the majority of our funnel was actually through product-led growth. So you sign up right now on Time Doctor, you try out a 14-day trial. If you like it, you put in your credit card and you buy it. And so about a month and a half in, we thought that we got a denial of service attack because our AWS node in Asia, Southeast Asia, shut down for about an hour and a half. And we were trying to figure out what the hell is going on. And we've got to spin everything back up again. And we found out that it wasn't an denial of service attack. It was a country that wanted to put 500,000 people on a credit card.
Oh my.
So they didn't talk to sales. They just proceeded directly to purchase because we were inundated with leads. We went from maybe 5,000 leads a month to 50,000 leads a month. Wow. Coming in to the site. So we had a very small sales team at that time. And we basically said, if you have less than 1,000 seats, we don't even talk to you. Whereas before that would be a big contract for us. But at that point, it was a completely different animal. And I think they signed up through a Gmail address, to be completely honest with you. So we don't have the type of AI tracking that we have now. So we weren't actually able to figure out who those people were, like, to do the SDR work to be able to figure out if that Gmail is co-associated with a massive government. And so we said, no, you can't deploy 500,000 seats on a credit card. Number one, I'd love to be able to get access to that type of credit card. That would be amazing. No doubt. It's kind of the aircraft carrier of credit cards, but it was a wild ride. Like, I'll just say that. And it was probably the biggest single craziest business opportunity of my lifetime because there was just such a massive inundation. At that point, the remote technology stack was a nice to have, and then it just immediately became a need to have for almost everybody, which was incredibly exciting.
And what did that moment teach you about being prepared? I mean, how do you stay ready when something like that? I mean, that's like getting hit by a freight train.
Yep. So I think about black swan events all the time now, to the point in which my team is really frustrated with me because they are like, well, what if our payment gateway shuts down? Our payment gateway is not going to shut down, but what if it does, right? Could we switch in 24 hours? What if all of a sudden we can do something else that 10x's us, 20x's us as a company? And I think a lot of those learnings, the vast majority of them, you're not going to recognize or you're not going to realize, but it taught me that I needed to be adaptable. So like increasing the speed at which we can adapt is really important. And I think when you're dealing with security in particular, that's usually a slow moving animal. So we wanted to be able to make sure, like even today, we have a team, development team we call chainsaw. Everyone else is trying to sharpen the axe and we're trying to build chainsaws. So it's a completely different thesis, but that's actually cut out from SOC 2 compliance. So we can move a lot faster with that particular department. Like we could respond in days, whereas if you did it with anything else, we would have to go through a lot of security protocols that we're just not really willing to do with fast moving things like our payment gateway shuts down, or there's a big opportunity in AI as an example that we need to go after.
Now, you've clearly built for scale since then, but scaling remote teams just isn't about being prepared. It's about having the right foundation. So what are the pillars of a great remote stack in 2025?
I think that's changing quarterly, to be completely honest with you. In 2023, I would have given you a really concrete answer. But in 2025, with the addition of AI, we're probably seeing a different kind of stack emerge. And I published this book in 2023. So this was right at the cusp end of, essentially, I would say, pre-AI work. And now we're in post-AI work. So I think the biggest one is, and this is going to sound really boring for everybody that's probably listening, but security and compliance. So if you're more than a 10-seat org, if you're less than 10 seats, I would say move fast and break things, and maybe you're going to get in trouble, but let's just move fast, right? But if you own people's information like we do, it's important to be able to be secure and also, by extension, compliant for the vast majority of that data that you own. So making sure that you've got all your protocols in place. If you're compliant, if you have a certification, go and pursue that. We actually just got a really sexy ISO that I remember my CISO was telling me it took us like 4 years to be able to get to. But that allows us to be able to open up to other enterprise clients, and also too shows that we're a lot more secure than we were before. And so that's the first one. The second one I would say is process documentation. So that's the one that I will tell people, if you are thinking about running remotely, you're probably thinking of running asynchronously. So asynchronous management is essentially the ability to be able to manage people without interacting with them synchronously, like we're doing right now. The person that's listening to this recording is consuming this content asynchronously. I have the analogy between, I'm sure you're probably around the same age as me, between the Friends TV show that I used to watch on Fridays at 8:30 p.m. And if you missed the show at 8:30 p.m., you weren't in any of the conversations on Monday morning at school, because all your friends were, mostly the girls, to be honest with you, were watching Friends, and you just really couldn't hang out with them if you hadn't watched the episode of Friends. So that's synchronous consumption of content, but Netflix is asynchronous consumption of content, meaning the content is available for you when you want to be able to consume it. And so that's the next big piece, is when you've got process documentation in place, you can actually consume, or your team members can consume, copious amounts of information without you necessarily being the person that's communicating that to those people synchronously, and allows those teams to scale at a much faster rate. And then the third one is agnostic metrics. So inside of our organization, we make sure that everyone has a quantifiable longitudinal number that they are accountable for. So I have the amount of podcasts that I'm on. And then also inside of that number is the amount of revenue that we theoretically generate from those particular podcasts, which is always an estimate. But there's a bunch of metrics kind of connected to that. So how am I doing on this task? How can I tie what I'm currently doing today to revenue 6, 12, 18 months down the line? Everyone needs to have that type of a number so that you can actually measure what people are doing, as opposed to just essentially managing by chance, which I think is ironically what happens inside of offices the vast majority of the time. Just because you see someone doesn't necessarily mean they're being productive. And when I see remote organizations, they're actually much more precise about their metrics than office synchronous ones.
Now, if you're a remote leader and you're starting fresh, like, what 3 tools are you requiring from day one?
I would say some type of process documentation tool. So that could be something like Google Docs. If you want to go super cheap, easy to deploy, put down some documentation that way. There's a couple really great tools out on the net right now, like Glean is a really good one for process documentation. There's another one that is a running remote alumnus, super.work, which is really great. So what that allows you to be able to do is it absorbs all of your sources of data into one single platform. And then it doesn't create any SOPs, but you can ask a question and then it basically creates an SOP from that available information. So it's your own personal GPT of the company, which is really cool. Another one is Rust. No, not Rust. I'll put it down in the show notes. But between Glean and super.work, those are 2 really great ones that you should kind of check out. The next one I would say is some form of communication. So we use Google Apps for Business, for email, for Google Docs, for all those types of things. Another really good one that I've been playing with recently, and it's funny because I wish I used to give you a much more concise set of tools, but because they're changing so quickly with AI, it's one of those things that we have to kind of change around. Is another really good one is GenSpark. Have you ever played with GenSpark, Jake?
I haven't yet.
So this one is pretty cool. It's basically an internal LLM platform that allows you to be able to do like AI slides, Google AI spreadsheets, AI documentation. You can turn any piece of information into AI podcasts. There's AI image generation, AI video generation. It can do calls for you. It can do cold calling. Like, it's an entire platform. But the cool thing is that it's all connected inside of an organization. So it also does all of that SOP work as well. It pulls in your Google Drive. It pulls in all of these different data sources. So you can have it all in one place. And the thing that I think is really cool about it is it also has a fantastic MCP server inside of it. And basically what this does is an MCP server allows AIs to have access to APIs. So it's pretty much like documentation for an AI on how to access different tools inside of your company. And that is incredibly powerful, because for me, I can be doing a call. I can bring my GenSpark call transcription tool to that particular meeting, and then it automatically creates a task list inside of Asana for me in the right document that I was looking for, which is kind of magical when you think about it. And then the third thing is some type of project management tool. So we use Asana. Doesn't matter what you use. Trello is probably the cheapest. Asana is a little bit more expensive. We also use a tool called Jira, which is essentially project management for developers. But you need to be able to write out tasks and then identify when those team members execute on those particular tasks. So that's your basic stack that I would use. The other one, obviously, too, is Time Doctor, but I'm a little disingenuous by saying that. But the ability to be able to actually measure that time against those tasks is really important. So if I can figure out how much time I'm spending on this podcast, as an example, which is a task that Time Doctor is currently measuring, and then our pre-interview as well, I could actually look at all the documentation to be able to see, okay, I spent 3.5 hours on this podcast. What's my return on investment 6 months later?
And that brings up AI is just such a hot topic, and I think it'll continue to be for the foreseeable future with all of these tools and security and all of these topics. But how is Time Doctor using AI right now?
We're using it a couple ways that I can talk about, and then a bunch of other ways that I can't, which is really frustrating. But because there's some really cool stuff that we're doing with the tech. I would probably say right now, when I think about where we're going to go in the next 24 months, is you're going to have a work assistant that's going to help you do everything in your job. So all the things that you don't want to do, that AI is going to do it pretty quickly and easily. So I don't know if you remember way back in the day, like Windows 3.1, you had a little tiny icon that was not a stapler, but it was like people are screaming on the podcast right now. You put documents together with it.
Your agent.
I don't know what it is I know what it is in French. C'est trombone in French, but because I'm French, I can't remember what the translation is. Not a staple. It is the opposite of a staple. Anyways, it's like the ability to put a whole bunch of documents together, and this happy little icon would follow you around in Windows 3.1, and I think even Windows 95, saying, "Do you need help with this? Do you need help with that?" But it was never helpful. It was actually super annoying, and people would turn it off almost immediately. It'll be that, but it'll be super helpful. So what it'll allow you to be able to do is say, hey, you know what? I think that what you're doing right now is not productive. I think based off of all of your priorities, you actually should be working on this one, priority number 2, and priority number 1, I can actually do as an AI. So let me just take that one away from you and I'll go execute on it while you work on number 2, because the AI can't do the podcasts. So let's increase the amount of time that you're spending on podcasts and minimize the amount of time that you are filling out P&Ls, as an example, right? So that's pretty much where I think everyone is going. When you look at meeting bots, when you look at productivity bots, when you look at these process document platforms, they're all moving in that particular direction to be able to say, what is uniquely human that you should continue to do and what can be replaced by AI. And most of the time, those tasks are relatively boring. So it's going to be a net positive for humanity once we get those pieces out of there. But I mean, just a couple things that I can tell you about is, and we just launched this last week, is benchmarks. So we can now benchmark specifically where you are in comparison to your profession. So we use machine learning and artificial intelligence to be able to see what your profession is, and you don't even need to tell us. Basically, for me, it would say, I'm a marketer with executive activities. That's actually what it tells me specifically. So then it compares me to the other 4,000 people that match that particular profile and say, well, you use email 28% of your workday, and everyone else in your category uses it 20%. So you're using email too much. And that might be something that you need to be able to take a look at. And the only reason why we can do this is we have over 11,000 job categories on our system that update every single week through AI, because they're always dynamic and they're always changing, right? I just talked about GenSpark. GenSpark is 45 days old as a company, but incredibly impressive. Well, we might actually see a whole bunch more people starting to use GenSpark. So that job category changes because of this new usage, the new use of this application. And the other thing that's really cool is you can actually peer into your industry and see, well, what are the new applications that didn't exist 6 months ago that do now for your peers? And that's kind of a really cool one that we find quite interesting. The biggest use case that people are getting out of that right now is AI usage. So we get this constantly, which is, well, we need our team to start using AI. We just bought ChatGPT team plan for $60 per user per month. How do we know that people are actually using it? Well, our tool can benchmark that and tell you, number one, people are using it 33 minutes per week on average, but is that the top 80% of companies like yours? Is it the bottom 10%? You don't know. So with this tool, it actually tells you specifically where you fit.
Now that makes me wonder what features or metrics are enterprise leaders mostly asking for you all today?
In terms of where Time Doctor fits, it's mostly productivity metrics. And then the secondary industry is compliance.
Gotcha.
So when you look at a lot of and it's kind of fun to be able to see where the industry is now caught up, because it's been 5 years since the pandemic. And initially there were no procedures or protocols for any of these professions, right? So the banking industry just released something about 6 months ago where, and to be honest with you, we disagree with how the requirements needed to be able to work remotely, but because banks own the majority of commercial real estate debt, I think they're making it very difficult for people to be able to have remote jobs in their industry. But one of the rules is that they actually have to spot check your work from home environment once every 2 years. So you'll randomly have an auditor that will knock on your door saying, where are you working? Show me exactly where you're working. Oh, you're working at the kitchen table? You said you weren't working at the kitchen table. You said that you were working in a secure office that your wife couldn't get access to. Those types of things are really important. And if you're not compliant for those, I mean, we're going to see a whole bunch of remote work compliant precedents. Probably they're already happening now, but there's going to be a lot more that are going to be rolling out over the next 24 months. So that's the big one that we think is a much larger market that we're pursuing as well.
We're seeing that market explode on the IT front. A lot of smaller businesses, especially the small to medium-sized businesses, asking about SOC 2 and CMMC and some of these other HIPAAs starting to get teeth to it. So we see a lot of compliance conversations starting to come down ourselves. You mentioned off mic that you've walked away from huge deals because of compliance gaps. So can you tell us the SOC 2 deal story?
Yeah, I mean, we got SOC 2, and I probably would say SOC 2 cost us 7 figures for us. And we didn't fully commit, and we did it in stages, and we shouldn't have done that. It probably would have been a lot cheaper had we worked with someone like you that just would have said, here's the plan, how to execute on it. But it's made us 10 times that in terms of revenue, because we had so many deals that fell through the cracks because we just didn't have that certification. And you know this better than probably most people, and people listening probably know it very, very well, is once a CISO or anyone that works in security sees that certification, there's generally no more questions, right? It's like, you're SOC 2? Okay, I check the box because I now have your SOC 2 certification. So therefore, if something happens, it's not my responsibility because I signed off because there's SOC 2 certification. It's the due diligence has already been done, right? And we had this very large contract that I worked on for, man, must have been 6 months. I met with their board, you know, the classic kind of enterprise wine and dine type of environment. And we got a POC for 1,000 seats, and this organization was hundreds of thousands of seats. So it was it was an 8-figure recurring contract for us. And got the POC, the check cleared on the POC. We were ready to go. And the work that I was doing was in Southeast Asia. And then the CISO was in California, in LA. And it came down to final approval. And the CISO saw this going across their desk, and he stopped and he said, wait a minute, I need to talk to these people. I have no idea what you're doing. Like, okay, you're pulling data out of our organization. How is this compliant? And I had this phone call with him, and he said, what type of certifications do you have? And me not knowing what the hell I was talking about, I said, what kind of certifications do you need? And he said, wrong answer. And that was, we got shut down on that account. But as I told you before, the thing that was even funnier is that POC rebuild the next year for those same 1,000 seats. And I went to my champion in that organization and I said, we've rebuilt. I'm really sorry about that. Let me refund you. And he said, oh, no, don't do that, because we'll never be able to get this contract up and running if you shut down the contract. And it just goes to show you that these large enterprise companies have so much money that they would spend tens of thousands of dollars just keeping the chance of deploying a piece of software open versus actually shutting it down. So there's huge opportunities there, but it is very much one of those things that we had a lot of sticker shock with regards to SOC 2. And it's because we were doing it on our own and we didn't really understand what we should have done from day one, which is get a proper agency in place that could actually just streamline the entire process for us so that we could actually have gotten that certification. If we had gotten it 5 years before we did, I probably would be 10 million, 20 million ARR richer at this point, which sucks.
And I think there's a lot of other owners that are probably sitting listening to this right now, and they're like, man, I've got $1 million contract sitting on SOC 2 compliance. And exactly. So, and they're trying to decide whether SOC 2 is something that they want to, partake. And so how long did it, I mean, you've kind of said it's taken a little bit longer, but where did you start?
It took us about 2.5 years, I think 2.5 to 3 years. If I had to be very specific about, you know what? Let me reverse that. It's even longer, because that discussion was pre-pandemic. It's kind of interesting how there's a black hole of time around the pandemic where time moved faster or slower or just kind of stood still. Yeah, so we probably worked on this for longer, but the problem for us is we investigated it with internal team, and then we said, oh, maybe we should do it. And then we'd wait 2 or 3 quarters, because by that point, the contract had already lapsed, meaning the opportunity had passed us by. So I would say if you have, and everyone has to kind of look at it themselves, but if you have more than $1 million in recurring contracts that have not just come from one source, but have come from multiple sources, it's probably time to do SOC 2. That would be at least from my experience, very clearly what we should have done, and we should have done it as quickly as possible, because it would have taken us 6 months if we had done it properly, at least to get SOC 2 type 1, right?
So,
And usually if you get SOC 2 type 1 and you're working on type 2, they're good, right? Like they'll let you go through. And we've only had maybe one client that's actually checked up on our type 2 compliance after the fact. So again, it's one of those things that's just, it's a check mark
and
that person needs.
and talk about internally, you started out with those conversations, and I remember you saying, hey, we had a group of individuals inside the organization that were championing this, and it kind of eventually got to just be a couple people, or if not just one.
Yes. Well, and it was just, you need to have internal champions that really push this kind of stuff forward. And one of the things that I didn't recognize before we entered enterprise that I understand very clearly now is it's not about whether or not you make the sale or not. That's actually not that important, right? It is much more important that you have a champion inside of the organization where that individual, essentially, it's their asses on the line whether or not that closes, right? They are now part of your organization. We've actually had some people that we've had some people on contracts where they have closed deals for us as the internal champion, meaning they were the ones that helped us do the deployment. And then they've left that organization and they've gone to another organization that knows that that organization needs Time Doctor and has reached out to us saying, hey, I'm kind of working like as a contractor now, as a consultant. I'd like to be able to take Time Doctor on the road. And then they actually get like an affiliate cut, like a partnership cut of that, because they just recognize that they can make so much money that way, right? Just basically bringing it to organizations that they've already built a relationship with. And once you get onto that road, it's incredibly exciting because you have a group of partners that already know how to deploy your solution at scale. And again, maybe you're dealing with 10 contracts, 15 contracts, but we're talking about 7-figure recurring deals, right? And these deals, when you're at the 7-figure mark, they don't churn out in a year. They stick with you for 5, 10, 15 years, right? That's like bank government level contracts that don't really go away. So they're incredibly stable. And so for me, the key piece of that is having that SOC 2 compliance to be able to start that journey. Without that, it just doesn't work. I would probably say at this point, anyone that wants to buy more than 6 figures recurring worth of software from us, SOC 2 is part of that conversation, or some type of security certification.
Now, I think that there's a lot of organizations that we talk to that they've started down the compliance and they try it themselves. They look at all the controls. They start going down through, hey, we do this right, and then they figure out very quickly they don't understand the context of the controls. They don't understand that what are they really asking for here. And so just how was that journey for you all? And then when did you decide to bring an agency in that would help you get it to where it needs to be?
We did it very late. So actually a really bad example of this because we did it very, very incorrectly. Hindsight being 2020, we probably just sort of hired an agency from the very get-go to be able to do it. But the way that we actually got over the hump was we had a CISO. So we hired a CISO for our overall security. The other thing that I think is funny to be able to add in here, at least as a software company, is just because you have, and this was kind of like a bit of scar tissue for me that I had to fight at every turn. Just because you're SOC 2 compliant or GDPR or PCI or HIPAA compliant does not actually mean you're secure. It means you actually follow a procedure and a document and basically a process that gives the perception of security, but is not actually secure. And so this was a major sticking point for me because when I looked at SOC 2 compliance, I'm like, this is not compliance. This is like, we're more secure than the vast majority of SOC 2 certified companies that we see because we actually are thinking about what if people directly hack us? Like, how do we deflect that? How do we stop that from happening? What security protocols are in place? And we had built some really innovative ones that I don't discuss, because if I discuss them, then they would no longer be innovative or useful to us. But we have a lot of things in place that we've thought about security creatively and strategically. And so my issue was, we're way more secure. Why should we have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to some agency to be able to pay for SOC 2 compliance? And what I realized is it's not about being secure, it's about getting the certification. And that's the difference, is it's not about security, it's about the certification. Because all that the CISO needs is that checkbox to be able to say, okay, it's Jake's butt on the line if something happens to Liam's software company, because he's the one that signed off on this SOC 2 compliance. And that's the part that was so difficult for me to be able to get over mentally, that I just had to pretty much pay an agency to be able to get it done. So once we had a CISO and he was really saying, like, this is the way that we need to go, then all of those pieces came together pretty quickly.
So you essentially had, a compliance officer, someone security minded, that was, getting the agency that you were working with across the finish line in regards to the SOC 2. We talked to a lot of businesses today that struggle, and they hire an external company, and that external company is basically just a task pusher. They'll tell you, hey, you need to do this, go do it. And I think a lot of owners and C-suite that we talk to, they want it done with them. And really they need to understand that it is just finding one person on your team that knows your business intimately that can come together. And that's really what we see a lot of successful compliance programs is two teams working together. And then you got to have the tools. We have our own GRC tool because we didn't like the ones that were out on the market. And so now, and then we designated our own compliance officer to help other teams, get to that point. But let's say you get yourself a test done, you get the certificate, there's maintenance that's afterwards. You have to have evidence that if you were somehow to get audited. And so what does that maintenance look like month to month at your scale for Time Doctor? So
I don't have the exact details of it, but I can tell you that inside of our security team, like our security department internal, we have 4 people that are full-time that just deal with security. And again, they don't just deal with certification, but they deal with security, right? There's a whole bunch of people that have gotten hacked that had SOC 2 compliance. We could probably toss it into ChatGPT right now, and it could tell me 50 companies in the last month that have had their data stolen because of SOC 2 compliance. So it's not just, there's a certification conversation, and then there's, are you secure? And I think SOC 2 is a really good introduction to then saying, I'm going to work with an agency. This is going to be my first foray into this form of security. And if you're doing more than, I would say, 10 million a year, you need a security officer internal in your company. Like, you can't not, if you're running a software company, you cannot not have someone like that, because that will, I can tell you about one security flaw that we had. We had a very, very old version of Time Doctor, and we had not shut it off. So we had refactored, I think we're on like version 3 of Time Doctor. And we discovered that the very oldest version of a mobile app that no longer exists, you could actually tunnel your way into the current version of the application and start to download CSV files if you hacked it in a particular way. And the person that discovered this was a white hat hacker that had that basically had brought us a bounty. So we issue bounties quite often, and those are really great ways to be able to make yourself much more secure than you currently are now, because they're doing penetration testing, right? And you want the white hat ones, you don't want the black hat ones that are going to just steal your data, to really make sure that you have that level of security. And that's like, you can spend 100 grand, basically put up $100,000 worth of bounties, and you'll get, that money you'll get sent out. You'll reward those people, but it's money well spent. Because I think the bigger issue is I don't want to be in TechCrunch. Someone saying, hey, all of Time Doctor's data has now been stolen, right? I don't know how often you see that. It's like, I think the latest one was Spotify.
Yeah.
All of Spotify, I think it was Spotify, all of their data was grabbed, including credit card information, right? And it's just, those are the situations that you don't want to be a part of. And obviously there's a lot more fingers pointing at a company like Spotify than a smaller company like ours, but it's still important to be able to pursue all this stuff. But I mean, just having that team in place is so important, I would say. And then working with an agency to be able to facilitate all of that kind of stuff. Like we've also done, we looked at PCI. It was just too restrictive for us in terms of the security like the requirements on that security certification and our ability to move quickly. So we would, we probably would have had to have moved 30% slower had we been PCI compliant. And then even right now with AI, I mean, we're entering this completely new era. I would estimate that within the next 24 months, there should be some type of AI data handling security certification. I don't know if there already is. I don't know that space that well, but I'm assuming there probably will be, because in my opinion, this information is so dangerous right now in the wrong hands.
Now, is there any part of remote work you think AI shouldn't touch?
Yeah, there's a lot of places. Thinking about it.
I heard this question actually on another podcast, and I literally, it stumped me, and I figured I would pull this one out of my hat and try to stump you.
I think I'm really concerned about HR data. So, and we work in that space, and it is a scary space to be in. My hot take here, I mean, we're using AI because everyone needs to use AI. If we could put the genie back in the bottle today, I would say, yes, please. Please put it back in the bottle. I think it's too dangerous for us to be able to manage. And I think that all of the things that are happening right now inside of AI show me that we're moving towards a future that no one really wants to live in, and is probably going to be very dangerous. And it won't be dangerous in the next 10 years. It will be dangerous in the next 24 months.
I agree. I also think that companies aren't aware of how these applications are using their data. They don't understand. They don't look at if the data is being training the AI model. Is it yours? Do you give it to the company? And anybody listening, you need to make sure before you sign up, look at the privacy policies, figure out what they're doing with your data. And that kind of, gets us into another sector here. And that's with, with trust. And so I always thought it was, when we were talking offline, you were talking about mouse jigglers, and I just thought, I couldn't believe it that there's these things out here. And you tested dozens of these things. What did you find?
So I have about 25 of them in my house. I just thought this is a brand new one that I've never pulled out. I literally have like boxes of these things. So this is a mouse jiggler. And what this thing does is it literally jiggles your mouse. So you put a mouse on top of it like that, and then it just moves your mouse in a circle, or it jiggles it, and it just some kind of randomized action. Some of them have some of them move them in circles, some of them move them up and down randomly, but what they all do is they all work perfectly, meaning they all move like a computer would move. So they are not, if they're random, they're perfectly random. And if they're not random, then they are very detectable. So first of all, how many of these things do you think have been sold since the start of the pandemic?
I literally, I must live on another planet, because I literally, when you showed me and we talked about mouse jigglers, I could not believe it. I do know that in enterprise, there's they monitor your activity and make sure that you're on the computer, right? But I just didn't know this product was even out here, so I can't give you. I would say it would be around the thousands if I had to guess.
It's 5 million.
5 million mouse jigglers.
Yeah. 5 million mouse jigglers have been sold since the start of the pandemic. So when we do an audit inside of an organization, so we use AI to be able to detect whether or not these mouse jigglers are being used. And it's not a productivity issue, it's a security issue. So if your computer never sleeps, right? Most bank level security terminals, the 30 seconds after you take your hands off the screen, it locks down. You got to put your password back in because it's important, right? Then John just can't come over on your account and decide to move 500 grand out of your account or, out of a client's account somewhere else under your login. With these mouse jigglers, it keeps your computer up and running constantly. So you are not PCI compliant. I would argue that you're probably also not SOC 2 compliant if your terminal never locks down. And so you need to detect these in order to actually be compliant. And it's not something that's in like PCI SOC 2 compliant certification yet, but it is like if you're looking at the spirit of the law, the spirit of the certification, you can't have computers open all the time, right? You can't have your cousin Susie that's coming in, just sit down at your computer and then just start to play with social security numbers. So we detect these, and the way that we detect them is even if it's randomized movement, it's perfectly random movement. So I don't know if you've seen the newer CAPTCHAs that have just come out, which is just a checkbox. And it just says, confirm, are you a human? And then you just click the checkbox and you say yes. So they're not measuring whether you click the checkbox. That's not the purpose of the test. The purpose of the test is whether your mouse moved like a human being to the checkbox. It's measuring how those micro interactions that exist inside of your mouse, because humans move imperfectly. They can never move like a robot. And so because of that imperfect movement, they are able to, we can detect human movement versus AI movement versus computer movement very quickly and easily. And so I think that these things are also the bane of my existence when it comes to the trust inside of remote work. Because when I'm telling you there's 5 million of these units that exist, the thing that's very frustrating for me is the number one reason why people are going back to the office right now is lack of trust, not on the employer side, on the employee side, because they find those 2.5%, 1% of their organization that's using these types of tools and then realize who else is using these tools. Okay, we need to get everyone back in the office so I can actually see what's happening. And when you actually run a very pragmatic analysis, it's probably more cost efficient to let 2.5% of your organization use a mouse jiggler than to force everyone into the office where they're losing 10 to 20% of their productivity per day just commuting to the office, right? Like the cost benefit analysis, but people very rarely, they will always fight to get money back. They will very rarely work hard to get more. So if I steal $200 from you, you're going to move heaven and earth to get that $200 back. And you probably could have made $2,000 in the amount of effort that it took you to be able to get the $200 back from me. It's just human dynamics and how it works. So now we're seeing this weird phenomenon where if I kind of just chat with somebody and say like, why are you really getting everyone back to the office? It's these things. It's these mouse jigglers that a lot of people are very frustrated about. And then also just examples of people saying, hey, I'm not really working. I'm not available when I'm supposed to be available. And you need to be able to build trust on both sides. And right now I would say on the management side, trust is being degraded. And so they're trying to rebalance it. And the only way they know how is to be able to do old school management, which is get everyone back in the office, which is a real shame. Inside of our organization, we're an outcome-based company, meaning we want to be able to build an outcome. We want to be able to measure that outcome to hopefully make it more efficient and more productive for everyone. So there are things that one person does that can teach everyone to become 10 to 20% more productive. And that's where Time Doctor comes in. But fundamentally, we want everyone to just focus on the outcome, not how you actually, or not the amount of time that you spend doing it. Ironically, the less time you spend doing something, the more we want to be able to reward you for that type of activity, because you're figuring out how to do something faster and easier than everyone else. And so I find it very frustrating that the industry is moving in this direction, because it's just not moving anywhere good. And it's spurned on by these very few bad apples that sit in the bunch that are just ruining it for everybody else.
Yeah, and you also brought up when we were off mic about the overemployment movement.
Yes.
And I again, another eye opener for me. But
they don't like me at all, those guys.
where's the line between accountability and surveillance there? And
so that's an interesting one. First of all, let's define overemployment, because I think probably a lot of your listeners maybe don't really understand what's going on. If you go to reddit.com/ I think overemployed, or just go to Google or ChatGPT, type in Reddit overemployment, you'll be able to find the URL. And it is a subreddit where people share how to juggle 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 jobs without their employer knowing about it. So, and some of these, like, you just go by top posts of all time, it's fantastic. You know, it's like one of those posts, hey, I'm doing IT for 16 companies full time, and one of my employers just found out. What do I do? Right? Like that kind of stuff. And some of these people are doing like 2 to 3 million a year in turnover. And here's my perspective on it. If you are honest, right, and you want to be paid by an outcome, like you guys are an agency, you get paid by an outcome, right?
Right.
You have many clients, like that's an agency, right? They're just running agencies of one, but they're being completely dishonest and disingenuous. And it comes into huge ramifications with regards to security and compliance, right? What if I'm working for Chase Bank and another competitive bank, and I'm working for both of them at the same time? That's no bueno. That is really, really bad. And the way that they're actually finding out about these, by the way, is mostly it's payroll, because they can check whether or not you have multiple sources of income, payroll income, because the tax implications of it, it's like you're in different tax brackets. So why am I in the top 1% tax bracket if I'm only paying you 50 grand a year? So then the payroll people do investigations on this and be like, how are they making 600,000 a year? If you ever really want to kind of just hustle and cheat, it's a great opportunity to rip people off right now. But my perspective is it's incredibly disingenuous, and I have no problem with it if you don't tell your employer, but you have to tell your employer. And that's where I really draw the line. So that line between surveillance and accountability, I think it's quite blurred, because when you have people like that, and maybe, I mean, you're the expert on this, not me. If you had a couple employees that had 16 other jobs, would that impact your SOC 2 compliance?
Absolutely.
So there you go, right? That's to me something that you need to be able to be mindful of. And if everyone was just honest, then you could probably do it from a secure perspective. You could say, okay, you know what? You only need to do this job 1 hour a day. Perfect. We're going to get you a terminal. It's going to be your committed terminal for this particular job, and you're going to produce the outcome for me. No problem. But it's not like that. And this just, again, forces everyone back to the office, because what's the reaction to that? If you discover that inside of your organization, you'd say everyone back to the office. This is the fastest and easiest way for us to be able to solve that problem. I was way back in the day Marissa Mayer from Yahoo, she became the CEO of Yahoo, and she famously put everyone back into the office because Yahoo was primarily a remote organization. And she said it was better for productivity, it was better for team dynamics, and that wasn't the real answer. The real answer behind closed doors was the majority of the organization was supposed to log into a VPN, essentially a version of a time doctor, to be able to make sure that you're compliant and you're tracking, that you're measuring the hours that you're supposed to be doing. Again, in enterprise, the vast majority of the workforce logs into a tool like Time Doctor, but it doesn't necessarily have the types of bells and whistles that Time Doctor has. And they had discovered that the vast majority of those employees had never logged into the VPN in like the past 5 years. So there was no compliance whatsoever. Everyone was just kind of out doing stuff, but no one knew there was no accountability. So she realized you could A, fire 30% of the org and have a whole bunch of wrongful dismissal suits, or B, force everyone back to the office for a year, figure out who was doing their job and who wasn't doing their job, and then in a year later, re-implement remote work, hybrid work policies, of which they did. So I think we're kind of in that in-between stage right now where we had such crazy amounts of freedom during 2020, 2021, 2022. Now we're absorbing that shock back. We're going back to hybrid primarily. The vast majority of these the types of jobs right now are hybrid. And I would argue that we're probably going to see remote expand as the largest single category of work over the next 5 years, because you're just going to see, okay, we know how to do this in a compliant way.
We totally agree. We see that increase as well in our industry. I think the conversations with data and do you have 1099 contractors? How do they access your data? Do you provide a machine? Do you allow people to use their own personal machines? These are all different topics that have been very popular talking about. One last question in the realms of accountability, and what does healthy accountability look like in a remote first culture? And can you give a real example in your own team?
Sure. So for us, we have a policy of radical transparency. So in our organization, the goal is for everyone to have the same informational advantage as the CEO of the company, meaning they have access to the P&L. They have access to financial information. They have access to software changes, debates about what we're thinking about doing strategically. All of that information is available to everyone if they want to consume it. And there are some people that consume all of it, which is really great. And then at the end of the day, our philosophy is that the CEO isn't the CEO because they're smarter. It's because they have an informational advantage, primarily. Maybe a lot of CEOs would disagree with that, but I think the majority of them have an ego problem, to be completely honest with you. It's because they have an informational disadvantage or advantage. And so when we make difficult decisions inside of the company, like we need to cut 20% of this department, as an example, the majority of the time, the organization agrees. They say, we totally understand. This makes perfect sense because you have the same informational advantages as the CEO does. And there are a few times in which they don't. And we've actually reversed decisions based off of people saying, you guys are off here big time. Like we need to be able to change that around. So I think when you have that informational advantage, it provides really good context. Case in point, I'm using Time Doctor right now to be able to do this podcast, and everyone in the company has access to my Time Doctor, so they know that I'm on this podcast right now with you. So they know what I'm doing with my time, and at any time that they want, they can audit it. And it just allows for, when you have an environment where I have access to your information, but you don't have access to mine, that's where I think that there's a power dynamic issue. But if everyone has the same access, then it just makes everybody better.
I agree. So from AI to accountability to compliance, you build a global platform. But I want to rewind the clock for a second. You were a PhD candidate with supposedly the worst student reviews in your department.
Yeah.
And that's the whole department history. So how did you get from there to here?
Check it out, Jake. Keep this one. I haven't actually put it up yet. This is my master's degree. I don't even know if it tells me. Oh, I got a master in arts. Yeah, in sociology. And yeah, it was bad. Like I was really, really bad at teaching. And I was pretty good at academic level stuff. For anyone that's in high school thinking about going to university or an undergrad right now, the big cheat code is just like working hard and working efficiently. And I was good at those two things. So I used to spend my my time in between classes. I would just study at the library. Very boring, but it actually created a really good feedback loop for me where I got like a 4.0 in my undergrad and then went into grad school. So I thought I was going to go into academia. That's what I was going to do. A specialization in sociology and econometrics. And then I taught my first class and started with 300 students at the beginning of the semester, ended up with less than 150 and the worst academic reviews in the history of the department. And I remember walking into my supervisor's office and I said, I don't think I'm very good at this. And he said, no, you are not. And I said, okay, so what do you think I should do next? And he said, you got to get pretty good at this teaching thing if you want to do this over the next 20 to 30 years. So get good at this or figure something else out. And 6 weeks later, I threw a master's thesis under his door and I was out into the real world. And I realized at that point also, because I had built a sporting goods business counterintuitively in undergrad and given it up to pursue grad school because I just knew that I had to, like, I couldn't do both at the same time. And what I realized is I essentially kind of came out of the closet as an entrepreneur. So my mother and a little bit of my father, to some degree my father, but my mother really, really wanted someone to have a PhD in the family because there had never been anyone that had a doctoral degree in the family. And she really wanted that to happen. And I realized that I was living for someone else's dream as opposed to my own. And it never would have worked out long term. I never would have been happy. So if you're thinking about that right now, maybe you've lived that life. There's always time to change. I'm perfect example, right? I got into entrepreneurship. Well, I got back into it relatively late. I wish I had had that extra 5 years. That would have been really exciting. I probably would have been in a different place, but I'm very, very happy where I am right now. And I think that everyone at the end of the day should just try to do what makes them truly happy. And if you're doing that, then everything else will just fall into place.
Well, what was the mindset shift on, going from academic life into running companies and being an entrepreneur? Wouldn't you say that was kind of a dramatic shift?
I'm not very good at other people telling me what to do. And I think that everyone needs to look inside of themselves and ask themselves, are they truly okay with it? Or are they really bad at that one singular thing? So another example is like, I've had a lot of jobs. I have been fired or have quit pretty much all of them within about 3 months. I'm historically a really, really bad employee. And I just realized that if I can't get into entrepreneurship and make it work, I will not be able to feed myself because I'm unemployable fundamentally. So if you're that type of person, you probably are an entrepreneur and you just need to be able to kind of recognize that. Because I think a lot of people, it's a lot easier now than in like 2010, 2008, because that was before, there was a huge inflection point when the Social Network came out, the TV show the movie with Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
About Zuckerberg. That's when like tech entrepreneurship really got cool, which did a lot for just entrepreneurship in general. But before it was just boring, right? Like people didn't want to eat shit all day long. Like it just wasn't something that people were interested in. But there are some people like me where it's not a choice. This is the only thing that I can do. So you either live inside of someone else's world or you build your own.
I agree. And maybe the rise of social media has something to do with with the rise of entrepreneurship, people not having to go to a 9-to-5 manufacturing job, clocking in, clocking out, and realizing that they have their own destiny in their hands. Which
I think the other part too, to add into this, is I think that AI is going to revolutionize this within the next, it already has, like right now to 6 months from now. There's so many people right now that are just saying, I can't get an entry-level job. Can you get an entry-level design job? No way. It just doesn't happen, right? Can you get an entry-level engineering job? Entry-level engineering is down by like 40% year over year. It's really, really bad for those jobs. They're going to start their own thing if they have the DNA to do it. And that's the difference is, are you willing to work 80 hours a week for multiple years for no money to be able to get the ability to do what you want to do? A lot of people would say like, oh, okay, I definitely want to be an entrepreneur. I want to do it on my own. Like I want to strike out on my own. But, you jump forward 24 months and you're eating craft dinner on a shitty, like pallet desk, figuring out how much money do I have left in my account and can I go and hustle something in the next couple months to be able to make ends meet. Not many people really want to pursue that long term. And not only that as well, I was just getting into this conversation with my wife, who's also an entrepreneur. You can only talk to other entrepreneurs about entrepreneurship. The vast majority of the people in your life want to protect you from pain. They don't, and counterintuitively, pain is actually the thing that's going to make you better. So 100%. It's like this huge, weird dialectic where everyone wants to stop you from going through hard things. But going through more hard things is what makes you better at what you do. So the majority of those people will say, your parents, your family, your friends that haven't gone through entrepreneurship say, it's so much easier. Just go and get this job at Dell. It's good. Like you're going to make $100,000 a year working at Dell. You're making 10 grand a year working on your stupid little app that doesn't really work. Right. And what they don't know is they've never gone through that process. So my wife, the first year that she went and she built her business, she runs a mermaid business called Aqua Mermaid. So you put on mermaid tails and you swim like a mermaid. And she has locations all over North America where she teaches people how to do this. In the first year, she lost money. And I think she did like $500,000 in turnover, something like that. But she had a net loss of $50,000. So she had to invest another $50,000 inside of the business. But she had spent over $250,000 on the website and on stock, on mermaid tails and all this equipment. And I was like, yeah, but you're net positive 200,000. Like you made 200,000 because you're going to realize that accounts receivable in multiple years forward, not to necessarily get too nerdy about it. And she's in tears and she's like, I've got to shut down this business. It's not working. My parents say it's not working. My parents say I should go back and get a job at the employer that I had before. And I said, are you nuts? You're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. Like you're incredibly successful. So it's that mindset shift that people want to protect you from painful things. Don't protect yourself from painful things. Focus on doing hard things and it will make you a more successful person. I tell people all the time, things didn't get easier. You just got tougher. Nothing gets easier, right? That life doesn't get easier. You just got better at it. You got tougher. And that's why it feels easier, but it's exactly as hard as it was before, if not a little bit harder. And so it's really important for people to kind of recognize that is you have to level yourself up to be able to pursue these types of opportunities. And I think that AI is creating that environment en masse. It's never been easier to be able to start up a business. There was a guy that I was talking to on a podcast last month, and he vibe coded an app that's doing like $2 million a year, and he's not an engineer.
Wow.
And I'm like, it took me like 2-3 years to get to that level of application. And I had to manage 40 people. And you're doing this right out of the gate. So it's such a huge opportunity for people to be able to go after if they have the right DNA to be able to pursue it. I think it's more of a self-reflective thing than anything else. And for people that are listening to this podcast, I can't help you with that in any way, shape, or form, because I have had a lot of people that have messaged me about it, and I'm too busy doing my own thing. But just do hard things, and you'll succeed.
So, for all the owners, CFOs, COOs, founders, what's one thing that they should act on this week from our conversation?
I think everyone needs to try an asynchronous week. So I think one of the things that's going to battle test your organization for not only redundancy, but also remote work is put together some process documentation, put together some procedures on how to be able to operate completely remotely and asynchronously. And for 1 week, do not have any Zoom calls, do not have any phone calls, do not require instantaneous responses on Slack or Microsoft Teams or email, and just try to be able to operate a business without having that synchronous dependency, that feedback loop. And if you can do that for a week, it means you can do it for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, forever. And it empowers you to not only have more freedom as an entrepreneur, an executive, or the founder of the organization, but then also secondarily, it provides massive freedom and scale towards your organization en masse. Everyone inside of the company will be happier. I've tried this experiment almost 100 times with other companies, and 95% of the time when we survey people, they love asynchronous week and they want more of it.
I think I should try that as well. That challenges me. So, Liam, this has been amazing. It's been everything I thought it would and more. I'm looking forward to having you back. I would like to maybe in the next 6 months to a year, as the landscape changes, get you back on here, talk more about AI, talk more about Time Doctor and running remote. Certainly as we get closer to running remote as well, because I want more people to be exposed to that community of people. You can find that online, by the way, just like we did. We actually went searching for a remote community and landed on running remote. So anybody
cool.
that's interested in running remote, please go and find them on LinkedIn. But where can people find you, Liam, online and learn more about Time Doctor and running remote?
So first off, URL is timedoctor.com. You can try a 14-day trial right there. Runningremote.com. You can sign up for a ticket. If you want to get in touch with me, LinkedIn, just type my name into LinkedIn and you'll find me. And then for anyone that's interested in some of the content that Running Remote produces, I think it's particularly applicable towards this podcast. Just go to youtube.com/runningremote, and we have over 400 videos. All of our talks are up there for free. So if you want to consume the talks, they're up there if you can't afford to be able to go to the conference in person. And if you can, then say hello to me and Jake next year when you see us.
Awesome. Liam, thanks again for joining us. That's it for today's episode of Running Remote. Remote First Innovators. See you next time.
Thanks.
Remote First Innovators podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.